If you're doing it correctly, you will always find on your journey at least one person in your life, no matter what season you're in, no matter what status or state in life you're in, one person that can have a tremendous impact. Those of you, men and women of purpose, listening to this podcast, you find ways to be that person in the lives of others. And for that, I applaud you. For me, I have always been fascinated, enamored, in awe of how those people have come to be in my career specifically. And all of the twists and turns that my career has taken, I remember the people who have impacted me most and helped me to go to the next level. We all have bosses, or we've all had bosses that we don't have very, very nice things to say about. But I am excited because today I get to introduce to my community not only a boss, the person who hired me in my current position, but a colleague and a friend and a mentor, someone who truly has helped me through a very, very difficult season, both professionally and personally. She doesn't even know some of the impact that she has had. But when you see the interview, you'll understand exactly why. I am Brandon T. Bailey, and this is Controversy. Allison Carmichael has served in public education over the last 20 years as teacher, assistant principal, and principal. Through her tenure, she has experienced serious work-related stress. And those of us who have been working in education for any extended period of time understand exactly what that means. In 2017, she began a journey learning about mindfulness, for which she has been able to build a skill set experiencing tremendous benefits. As all teachers do, Allison felt compelled to share her learning with others. Second Arrow offers stress reduction strategies specifically to teachers. Allison, now also as Teacher Fit's mindfulness director, is a mother of 3 and a wife. Ladies and gentlemen, TS Strong community, please help me welcome a friend, a colleague, and in full disclosure, a supervisor, Allison Carmichael. All right, Allison, I am so grateful you took the time to come and talk to the TS Strong community. I want to start the interview off with a mindset check. So, in my network marketing days, I was taught to surround yourself with the thinking that outthinks you. So I want to expose my listeners to the way that you think, and since I've gotten to know it a little bit, I'm sure they're excited to hear it too. So, these are a few warm-up questions. You ready?
Bring it.
They won't be hard at all.
Like my name. Can we start with my name?
No, way too easy. First question. What motivates you?
I am motivated often by challenge. I don't know why, but when something is difficult, I want to overcome that. And
it's a great year for that.
Yeah, that's why I do mindfulness, is because I guess I like to be tortured a little bit, but I'm motivated by my kids, my role as a mother, my role as a wife. I really appreciate service-oriented activities. So attempting to, without being too dramatic or sentimental, leave the place better than when I found it. So yeah, lots of different things depending on the setting.
This depending on the circumstance. I got you.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's a harder one. Do you have fears, and how do you manage them?
Yes, I have a lot of fears.
Right.
Ooh, your name. This is controversial.
Listen, I warned you. The name of the show exists for a reason. You wait till you hear some of the other guests.
Brandon, I was like, my topic is not controversial.
Oh, sure it is, especially when it comes to faith. We're gonna get there. Don't worry.
Yes. So my fears. I really don't. This is a problem for me. I really don't want to let people down, and that's actually one of the things that I fight the most as a school principal. Is that I have to let people down, and I can't be all things for everybody.
Yeah.
And honestly, I have to make decisions for which some people will like that decision and some people won't, and that's just the way it is. And so you're always, kind of letting somebody else down, if you will. So, and again, we'd have to get a therapist in here to figure out where that all came from. But I guess that's probably the biggest thing that I think about at night is, am I doing good on behalf of other people? Are they happy with my performance? Am I doing enough for the kids? Is our school serving our community, to the fullest extent that it can? Yeah. Those I think are the ones that consume me. I'm afraid of scorpions. I've been
in Arizona.
I have been bitten.
Oh, that's right. Wait, she's from Chicago, y'all. So that makes perfect sense. I had to remember that. Like we didn't know what a scorpion was till we got here, and it's like that spider thing with the tail.
Yeah, no, and they're so camouflaged. Like you don't see them in the carpeting and the floor. And I was stung one time, and no. I was fine. I mean, I didn't have to go to the hospital or anything, but my leg, it was a 24-hour period of awfulness. And so now I have like a little trauma, of scorpions. But yeah, that's pretty much a nutshell. I could go on and on.
Certain of it. And I warned everyone in the introduction, full disclosure, this is a boss of mine. Okay. So I promise you all of the nice things I am saying are true and not because I work for her. Okay. Just throwing it out to the audience before they think I'm just okay. So moving on. The next question.
I think isn't Tom doing your eval?
Exactly. See? So now everyone can take it at face value. Perfect. Mindfulness. There it is. Mindfulness is a buzzword right now. What does it mean to you, and how do you use it? Yay! Yeah. This is your softball.
Here we go. I love it. Mindfulness to me, I'll kind of tell you my definition. I'll go backwards a little bit in time, and then you'll have to pause me because, as you know, I like to talk a lot. But mindfulness is the intentional focus in the present moment. Without passing judgment. And so that can be many things. You could be cooking, you could be gardening, but it really is about when you're cooking, let's say in this analogy, you would be, touching your ingredients. You would really feel the weight of the knife as you are prepping your vegetables. And it would be in that moment. So anything that had happened earlier in the day, you're no longer ruminating over that while you're cooking. You are right there. You're smelling, the food as it is being prepared and as it being made. I think I'm hungry, so that's probably driving this analogy right now. But you would be in the present moment, and the truth is, you wouldn't be passing judgment. So in this kind of silly, very easy analogy that doesn't stretch us very much, but if we were cooking, we wouldn't be like mad at ourselves that we're cooking, or mad at ourselves that we are in that present moment, or thinking we should be somewhere else. That's a huge part.
I should have chopped that differently.
Yeah. Right, exactly. Yeah, like, oh, my cubes.
They're not symmetrical.
Yeah, exactly. But honestly, I've got to tell you, it's been a journey for me. And the first time I picked up a book on mindfulness, the only book I was really open to was called A Book for Skeptics. It was the 10% Happier book by Dan Harris, who's a Good Morning America anchor. Now he's got an app. I mean, this was 5 years ago when I picked that book up, or 4 years ago. And I kind of, it's awful, but I tell my audience that is listening, like I did pass judgment over the word mindfulness. I felt like it was kind of a wishy-washy. I didn't think it really had meaning, it's kind of a wishy-washy word. I still think that. I wish it had a better name. But I also think just that stigma of like, I feel like I'm a very passionate person. I'm very energetic. I have too much energy. I'm like a terrier. If I was a dog, I'd be a terrier. Like, I have too much pent up energy, and I'm like, I don't want to be like Zen all the time,
Yeah.
And so I had this, I hate to admit it, but I admit it because I think that would help other people to also at least try it and see if it can work for them. Because the truth is, over the last 4 years, I have changed significantly in my behaviors, in my kindness, in my thought process. What's happening in my mind has changed a lot, and other people see it. So I know that you and I have only worked together for a couple of years, but if you asked peers that have worked with me since I was a beginning principal, they can tell you that I've changed, and that's because of the practice of mindfulness. So.
And you know what? You're not alone in that feeling that it was kind of wishy-washy. Like, one of the reasons that question is in the show flow is because as a person of faith, and oftentimes people of faith, they have a completely different, it's more associated with Buddhism and meditation in a very kind of, you were talking about that Zen, like in that very kind of Zen way, and people don't really understand. Like I said on a couple of other episodes, like I teach it to the band, and it's about awareness, because we all need to become aware of things differently, and there's so much positive impact on being able to do that.
Yeah.
But if people are thinking about it wrong, they'll completely miss it.
Yeah, I actually think that people of faith, that it's a potential that there is a categorizational thing that's happening, and that mindfulness is put almost into a religious box, if you will. And in our field, working in education, especially public education, obviously, we are not allowed to bridge that, religion and school, and that's not something that we're allowed to do. And so I do actually hear, in the mindfulness area and people on Twitter and out there in the world, this kind of idea that mindfulness is religious, and they can't separate that it could not be. I do think, though, Brandon, I think I come from a very active religious family. My mother was raised Methodist. My father was raised Catholic. And then I attended a Presbyterian church. So, it was kind of all over the place growing up in a Presbyterian setting. And so, I think that it's prayer is my, there's a lot of crossover, because you could call prayer mindfulness. You are sending out goodness into the world. You are, meditating on that moment. You're meditating on that person. You're meditating on that topic. You're wishing healing for the world, healing for others. So I don't think it's not religious, but I think that it could also be, like you said, brought to a place like a public school where it does not have the same strings attached. Yeah, and you can just be talking about the science of the brain and what's happening in the brain. And our kids, I'm concerned about our kids and the rise of ADHD, ADD, lack of concentration, the social media that they're growing up with that I didn't have to, and having to live through that as an 11, 12, 13-year-old. They need these skills, they need these skills. And I think it's a bonus if they're being raised in an also religious world, because they're going to get, some skills. They're going to have some practices that they can go to when they need it. But if our students, are not, then there's maybe nothing that's helping them to learn to be calm in their mind. Nothing that's helping them to figure out how to, like you said, be aware of what's happening in their mind.
Yeah. Now, before I let Allison get into the other segments, y'all, because those of you who listen to the show know she's starting to tap dance into some other areas. So I want to bring it back to the last mindset question. Tell me a story about failure and how you overcame that.
I feel like I fail every day.
Yes, talk about it.
Oh man, trying to think of a specific example. Oh gosh, I mean, just so many times. I was a former athlete, so I lost a lot of games. I sat the bench a lot. Yeah. My dad actually said, so I played softball. That was the sport I was decent at, and was lucky enough to play collegiately. And my dad would say, there's center field, there's left field, there's right field, and he would say I got to play left out. So, ouch. Which also is why, things don't hurt me, because
that was dad.
That was dad.
Because dad was like,
and
Dad,
I love him dearly.
get over it.
It's totally fine. I rode the pine. So I have experienced a lot of failure. I think that every day, though, there's moments of, man, I wish I would have done that differently. Or I think too, in our job, we're working with humans, and you just really never know what the kids are going to do and what challenges they're going to bring our way. And then you add parents to that. And so, if you're to prepare for every scenario, you just can't prepare for every scenario. And so, so what happens usually is I'll make a decision or make a call. And if I've regretted that decision or call, I try to just be a learner and decide, well, what would have been a better way? Did we use you're supposed to use data to make decisions. You're supposed to use the most local person. So let's say if it was something regarding the band, I would want to ask you as the expert, what we should do in that area. So it's kind of like I backtrack and say, well, what happened? Let me look at this, try to learn what I need to learn. And then honestly, it probably won't fix whatever had happened. It just helps me prepare for the next scenario that's going to come up. Yeah. It's almost like you have to just accept that occurred and move on and just better arm yourself for the next challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, folks, listen, Allison, I believe that the listeners definitely have a better idea of how you think now. Some of them are starting to take sides. They're like, yeah, this lady's crazy, or yes, I agree 100%. Or some of them are somewhere lost in the middle, and that's okay.
So we should say goodbye to some of our viewers. It was nice to meet you.
If they have lasted this long, I don't think they're going anywhere. You hear my first couple of episodes, and if I didn't lose people right then it's cool. We're
We
gonna
just
warm up
carry
to
on.
yeah, exactly. We're gonna warm up to the controversial stuff a little bit. The next segment is about faith. So I talk a lot about my journey and the controversy it has caused. But the TS community, I want them to understand your perspective. So let's get into that a bit. You ready?
Sure. Yeah, bring it.
So you started to kind of to hint at this with a very eclectic mix of denominations and such, but tell me your spiritual background and how has your faith impacted who you are today?
Yeah, so I really was the kid, we just went to church on Sunday. That's just what you did.
Yeah.
So you went to school Monday through Friday, and Saturday we did Saturday stuff, and then Sunday morning. Where I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, I was in walking distance of my school and my church. So
Yes.
it was very much a neighborhood. So
Yes.
the families that went, that were on my street, that I was the paper girl. So I would toss them a newspaper. I would see their kids at the school because we all went to school together. And then we also all went to church pretty much, together. So very, suburban, small town, very safe, it was just a nice, I had a mom that stayed home and raised me and, quit her job when she had kids and then went back to work after the kids were out of the house. And
Yeah.
I'm very thankful for that. And I remember when we went from, we moved from Indiana to Illinois when I think in the first grade. So how old are you? Maybe 6, maybe 5. And I remember actually when we moved, my parents took us to a few of the surrounding churches they were deciding which one that they wanted to, make as their kind of forever church. And I remember distinctly going to a Catholic church, which my dad was and still is very Catholic. And I remember the kneeling. I just wasn't accustomed to the traditions and what was happening.
And there are a lot of them.
Yeah, and I was so young too, and it just didn't. I couldn't understand what was going on, and I felt out of place, to tell you the truth. I mean, obviously, if you go a few weeks in a row, you would start to figure that out. Even as a small child, you see the routines of everything. But I remember that being a pretty impactful thing. My grandparents lived into their 80s and 90s, and that they were very religious and attended that Methodist church in a small Illinois farming community. And so I won't. We don't need to get into this, but I lived with my grandpa for a period of time, too, in college. And so I went to every Wednesday, we went to choir practice and they would rope me into singing, and I'm a terrible singer, but they needed a body, and so they'd say, "You're singing with us." And so it was me and a bunch of, 70-year-olds and 80-year-olds singing in the choir on Sunday, the Methodist tunes, and so that was part of my upbringing too.
Yeah.
So when we never really vacationed when I was a kid. We would just go to the farm, and every Wednesday was choir practice, and every Sunday was church. And then, you kind of grow up and you go to college, and that was really hard for me moving out to Arizona. One of my best friends who I love dearly, went to college with and was lucky to room with here. She was Catholic, and so I'd go with her sometimes because we lived together, so I would just attend church with her. But that's been a struggle for me, is finding kind of a place. Actually, COVID has kind of opened up my mind to maybe you don't need to go to the brick and mortar building. Maybe you can do more of the online, go to church online.
Yeah.
But right now, my family, we're members of a Methodist church here in Gilbert. And we have been poor attendees, but at the same time, I guess spiritually, I'm still that little girl, that has those ideals. We had neat programs. I was, of course, I was one of the teachers for the Sunday school classes.
Naturally.
Yeah, of course. You know,
Just makes sense.
my calling was always to be a teacher. But yeah, I was very involved, played music for the church. But then it was just a struggle. I felt I didn't really know what to do when I moved to Arizona. I didn't really know where to start. And so I kind of did the same thing. I toured around. But I don't necessarily think that that means I'm less spiritual, but I do find myself longing for the community of a
Good.
church and longing for that. It's just, it makes you feel good when you walk out. It's that
Yeah.
sermon, it's that pep talk, it's the singing, it's the whole event, you know,
Yeah.
that kind of gets you really the same as a mindfulness message about kind of just recentering, and the problems kind of dissipate and you can be more present and in the moment and thankful and appreciative. But yeah, so I've let it dwindle a little bit, and it's kind of sad. But every so often we kind of get ourselves back, you know, and
Yeah, yeah.
so,
Got to get back in that routine.
yeah.
I actually relate to that a lot. I mean, obviously, you've known me long enough to know I definitely grew up in church,
Mhm.
and religion, spirituality has always been a big part of that. But not only moving to Arizona, but going through life and mental health issues and all of that, and getting away from it, you do kind of long for those experiences, both the physical experiences, but also the emotional ones. Like
Yeah.
when a good service gets to you, there's nothing quite like that feeling you walk out with. So
You're
I can
like,
relate.
I am like, how does this person know what's happening to me this
Oh,
week? How do they know that I needed
yes.
to hear that? I think the other thing, and it kind of goes back to, you asked about what motivates me. I know we serve in public education. I feel that's a service industry, but I still long to give back, and I think it's like built in with a church. Like
Yeah.
you can be donating time, you can be donating, you can be, and I think that that's one of the big things that in my being, I would appreciate by really being more of an involved congregation member
Yeah.
than I am right now, because it is just, it's a great part of what churches do for the community, and a bigger community, the world, really. So
Yeah. So have you ever had the experience of kind of losing faith, or questioning whether or not the spiritual things that you learned growing up, were true or not?
no, but I have had to, that conviction had to show up. And so there are people that I love in my life that don't have faith, that don't believe in, a God, if you will, but they might believe in, being spiritual, or there being something, but they're not necessarily believe in a God, that are very close to me. And I've also had some very good friends suffer trauma, and had to watch them go through those phases of, why did this happen to my family? I'll speak very gently about one of my best friends lost both of her parents to violence, and so she did. She just kind of lost faith, and kind of had to go through that journey,
Yeah.
and
Rebuilding,
yeah,
rediscovery. Yeah.
yeah, and now she has come back, but I watched her go through that. So I would confidently say that no, that I haven't been pushed to that type of situation. I've been fortunate that my grandparents have kind of died of natural causes. My parents, I know you've suffered the loss of your father, and my parents are living. And so I think that there are some things that maybe I haven't had to face in my life that other people have, that I can see why that has occurred. But for me, I guess my conviction has shown up when I stand for what I believe in, when people I love, say otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is another one I think connects to you. The Bible talks about prayer and meditation, and one of the things I've talked to my guests about is I don't believe the modern church, right, really understands and appreciates the difference between the two and how they both come together. So how would you compare and or contrast these two valuable practices?
Yeah, it's funny because I would never want to deter someone of faith from thinking that they were the same. I really wouldn't, but I would argue that you can meditate without having a spiritual event occur. And actually, that's how my meditation is not. I wish it was spiritual. I wish can somebody come and talk to me and tell me what to do?
You haven't been enlightened yet, is what you just
No,
said.
no, that'd be lovely. I will continue on though, and maybe one day.
Oh
But
man.
it is just my experience with meditation is so the opposite of religion. It just is science, and it's really an argument with the thoughts happening in my head, and it really is about it's about what's happening right here. And not about, trying to connect or trying to do. It is actually really not about trying at all. Actually, I'm trying not to try. I'm just
Yes.
trying to be calm. I guess telling you about my fears, I'm trying to not be so critical. I'm trying not to pass so much judgment on myself. And so my practice, and if I'm just one example of the many people that can have a meditation experience that is not religious, I think that goes to show that you can have those moments where you really are just it's just about the science of the brain, and
Yeah.
we're just trying to calm the thoughts and just calm the mind, become more reasonable, become more logical. Now, if that were to ever turn into a spiritual event, I will tell you, and I would not be upset about it. I would be excited, and I really don't want to be. I really think that the people that can mesh the two, good power to you. Power to you, and I would pursue that. I would never deter anybody from trying to separate meditation from prayer. But I would argue that it can happen, and that goes back to thinking that these skills, and I think they're skills that you practice,
Yeah.
need to be taught in places like public school, and we would not call them prayer, and we would not
Right.
talk about the spirituality of it.
Right.
It would just be, that very internal practice, and going back to again the power of conscious breathing activities for your nervous system, and the power of concentration and focus. And then if a student could learn to harness that and use it also in their religious beliefs, that would be really great. But I do think that you could do them separately.
All right, folks. Allison has already shared some great insights, but I want to switch gears a bit. All right. So we've talked about faith. Now I want to talk about feelings. And this is often much harder to do. So this is where Brene Brown's teaching on vulnerability really does come in handy. So although this can get a little bit messy, I think it's beneficial for our listeners to really understand. So are you ready to get into feelings a little bit?
Sure.
Listen,
I would need to-
I almost want to tell them how prepared you are for these next couple of questions.
should, should I add this to the list of fears from earlier?
Too late now. Tape's running.
I'm ready. I'm rolling up my sleeves. Let's go.
So, what does mental health mean to you, and why should a larger number of people care?
Because we don't care right now. That's the problem, is nobody cares. So you talk about physical health, and for some reason we're all talking about dieting and working out, and you encourage people to work out. You encourage, oh, that's great. Go, oh, you're eating better. Oh, good for you.
Right.
Oh, you're choosing, a salad for lunch, which is something I've never said, but there's support. There is widespread support for seeking physical health. I mean, so I'm in the midst of a doctoral program, and honestly, you go back in the very first classes on Freud and, you know, all of that. There was actually just a TV show on Netflix that shows how the Oxford Dictionary was written. I can't remember the name of it right now. And they examine, there's a character that is, you know, of that time period, and you know, he's in an insane asylum, and it really goes back to, you know, 100 years ago or 120 years ago, nobody knew what to do with people that were struggling or having anxiety or panic attacks or post-traumatic stress. And so they locked him up, you know, and I really do think the history of that is hard to move forward from. And so you still have this stigma of, if you're not, you know, I smile a lot, you know, and I think we all know that even though people smile, they might be battling something internally.
Right, exactly.
But society's not okay. We're just not okay with saying, you know, I'm having a tough time, or I'm struggling with anxiety right now. It's almost like people don't want to hear it. You know, it's like, I don't have time to listen about your anxiety. But the truth is we're all suffering from anxiety, just to what level, you know, and to what degree. And obviously some days, some weeks, some months are going to be better. But I think that there's a lot of history, and I think there's a lot of, you know, you go back to what a man was supposed to be like back in the 50s or the 60s. And, right, you know, all of that, I think, is part of it. And so I do think, though, if we can normalize supporting mental health, just like we support physical health, I think that's going to help all of us, yeah, to be better.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So this one is where it gets a little interesting, right? Most folks aren't willing to talk about it, and you kind of hinted at this in your last answer. But I believe we're all 1, maybe 2 degrees of separation from a mental health complication, right? Have you or someone you know had an issue with mental health? Obviously, you know, you don't have to get into too particulars, but have you been close enough to an issue of mental health, and how did that get resolved?
I've never been diagnosed necessarily, but I absolutely believe I don't know. I want to be respectful to anybody suffering from depression, in saying that I feel like I was depressed, but at the same time, I want to be respectful to anybody who's suffering depression. That I really had a hard time entering administration. And I hate to talk about it, Brandon, because I never want to deter. I know that you're an aspiring, you know, school leader, so I want to encourage you to do it while telling you how
y'all see what she doing.
Yeah, like, can we skip this one? And it's great, Brandon. But no, I really struggled with that. I think there was a lot to going from my classroom, where I had so much control over my world, and then going into administration, where you have like no control. Was really a hard thing. Yeah. And you know, you just walk in and you have no idea what emails are going to be there, what problems are occurring. I mean, it can be so many different things, you know, from the building having a leak to somebody being upset or a teacher struggling with something. So I had a hard time when I entered administration. I righted my course mainly with physical fitness. And so I got myself back to the gym. I used to be an athlete, so I kind of got myself right by turning to the gym. And then that's when I joined our school district and struggled again. And that's when I turned to mindfulness.
Yeah. Whoo-hoo. You know what's interesting? Like, I know that you were trying to be careful, but the reality is, like, depression, anxiety show up in so many different ways, mm-hmm, in every person. And, yeah, you know, I think one of the things that I've tried to accomplish with this show and with the project is we have to we have to remove some of the stigma so that people will feel more comfortable just
Yeah.
dealing with it. It's not about comparing your pain to my pain or your frustration. Like, none of that matters when you're just trying to heal. you
Man,
just trying to be whole.
I appreciate you saying that, and that's the kind of stuff I think I need to hear. And the truth is, I don't tell it to myself. I think
Right.
we're so self-critical, that inner person inside here is like, don't
Yeah.
step on that, don't be controversial, don't go into that territory. And so you're always kind of second guessing yourself. And I
Yeah.
think you're totally right. The more that we talk about the fact that we struggle, I have known other peers of mine that have been debilitated momentarily for panic attacks. I
I
know
can imagine.
many peers that have turned to doctors and medication for their workplace, their job-related anxiety. So yes, I feel like I've known numerous people. Actually, probably it would be surprising if we started listing all the people who even in my life have suffered like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so here's a good segue because you started kind of hinting at this in this answer. So, mindfulness and therapy, like let me be very clear about how they work together here. But they've taught me to be an observer of feelings and not a slave to them. So it's not always easy, right, to identify those negative feelings. What is your experience with identifying negative feelings and emotions, and how do you address them once you've recognized them? Because I know that that's a big part of the mindfulness practice, like learning to kind of not judge the thoughts that are coming to your head, right?
Yeah.
But at some point, you got to kind of start to deal with it. So how do you deal with that?
Okay.
Yep.
I love the question because it's got me like, I'm like all energized. Like I have like 7 things I want to say all at one time. So my pause is like, okay, get these things in order, Allison, figure out how you want to convey them. This is really what Second Arrow is about. Now, I don't necessarily feel like I'm an expert on therapy, but Second Arrow, the company that I generated just because I was like, oh my gosh, everybody should learn this. Everybody needs to know this. All the teachers that I've talked to that are overwhelmed. We have, so many students in our class. We have so many parents asking a lot of us. We have a lot of initiatives. It's just overwhelming. And we work with humans. We're not in an industry, that's pumping out a product. We are working with humans, and that makes it automatically a more stressful work environment.
Yes.
Just because. And we work with children, and we have that relationship with children for an entire year, and sometimes years beyond that. So it becomes very personal, right? It becomes very personal. So Second Arrow, the parable, is a Buddhist parable, and it is about that we'll all suffer pain from life, right? The first arrow is just pain. And so it happens because we're alive. And thank goodness, because that means we're alive, right? But we are going to have to suffer from injury, from diagnosis. This pandemic is an example of a first arrow that we just all have to suffer. But it could also be trivial, like a stubbed toe or, hitting your funny bone. It can also be emotional, like a breakup, a divorce, or even the death of a loved one. So those are first arrows. But the second arrow is how you respond to the first arrow. So I get shot by an arrow and I could be like, what? Who shot me? I'm going to go get revenge. Or what? How come I just got shot by that arrow? And I can be all ruminating about it. And why did this happen to me? And really internalize and all that. So the second arrow, what was just this epiphany for me, and epiphany enough for me to start a company and try to spread the word, was that I was choosing that second arrow, just like you talked about, and that was like mind blowing to me. First, it was a hard lesson to learn because I was like that. I didn't want to accept that I was choosing to suffer, but once I realized that my job wasn't causing me stress, that my actions were causing me stress, that's when I realized I can do something about this. And so that's when I really dove into the practice of mindfulness and meditation, and went from there. I'll give you a quick analogy that I use when I do. So I work for a company called Teacher Fit, and I provide them some content. And so my job is to provide mindfulness content. And so one of the analogies I use, or stories I use, or practices I use, is called the thought river. And if you have to practice. So I think what you said there is it just can't happen. You have to practice it. It's just like building muscle. You can't just, do one curl and think that you're going to have, strong arms. You have to do this every day. It's got to be part of something you do. But this is such an easy thing, easy way to think about things is you could be just sitting next to a river. So just imagining a river next to you, and you just kind of almost like it's tangible, almost like a thought can be held in your hand, no matter what it is. So I have to do the dishes. It doesn't have to be important, but whatever thought is happening in your mind, you just take it out as if it's tangible, and you place it into the river, and it's just a babbling brook, Brandon. It's not a rushing river or anything. And you watch the thought float away, and you're not mad about it, and you're not happy about it, because it could be an angry thought, something that you want to go away, or stress that you're carrying, but it doesn't make you feel anything. You just can watch it. And the more that you do that, the more you can take those negative thoughts out, or those angry thoughts, or those self-destructive thoughts, right? You can take them out, and you can say, I don't need this. I don't need this hurting me. This is doing more damage than is necessary. This is not helping me. I'm a worry wart, and I'm working on that. But I've realized, what product does worry, what good does that bring to the world?
How does it help me? Yes.
Right? It's just damaging. It's damaging to me. I worry about everything, and is nonsensical. It does not make anything better to carry so much worry. So when you start to say, you disconnect, you realize you are not the same as your thoughts. They're happening, but some of them are just automatic, Brandon. Some of them just come, and you can't do anything about it. And so if you can kind of disconnect, kind of make them tangible, and watch them just wash away, that's one of my favorite visualizations. That's one of my favorite practices to do just that.
You all, this is why I was excited to get Allison on the show. So I want to make sure everyone sees how uncomfortable she was when we started this segment, and then boom, right? So here's the deal. Like, when I heard the second arrow story, I was like, man, I totally connected to it. One, because I think it makes the practice of mindfulness make more sense, right? Yeah. Because it's about recognizing that second arrow. Mm-hmm. Like, we do it so quickly, we respond. Mm-hmm. And there's so much to just recognizing, I just responded this way, right? Yeah. And then learning to do that non-judgmentally. Oh boy, that is work. And I talk a lot in the show and to the TS community about the work. And Allison, I'm telling you, when we started talking about this a long time before the show actually materialized, I told you there's got to be some kind of work together, because I think that what you're doing in that space is going to be so beneficial to people who have trauma in their life, and subconsciously they're sending out second arrows. Yeah. Right? And teaching people to learn to recognize it, and then start sending less of them. And then before you know it, like you said, people can see the difference. And I think that's what healing is really about. That's what, overcoming the hurt is really about.
That's inspirational to hear you say all of that, but that is really true. And I don't even think it has to be that earth shattering. It can be, and I think that's great, but it's also just about like having a happier lunch, or a drive to work that is a more pleasant drive to work. I can't tell you how many times I used to get, not necessarily road rage, but mad at people on the road.
Absolutely.
And, and it's like, why did they cut me off? It was personal. Hey, don't you know I'm going somewhere, and don't you know the rules of the road? But that person might just have needed to turn right, or
Yeah.
maybe they're lost or something. And so instead I get all aggravated, and then I carry that anger into work, and I tell the secretary all about the person that cut me off. It's almost like we just take these things like personally, right? It's that second arrow. So I got cut off. So what? That's its first arrow, right? I don't have to make the second arrow stick and linger. And I think if we have those better moments more often, that builds a healthier well-being overall.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, guys, Allison, the TS Strong family, listen, we're all warmed up now. I want to get to the real controversy here. So this is faith and feelings. Let's bring them all together in this jumbled mess we called life.
Here we go.
When I first conceptualized this podcast, it was specifically about mental health. But after talking to some friends and kind of throwing the idea around, it really became a bigger conversation about faith and feelings and the tension that is sometimes experienced between those two things. So this is a controversy I want to shine a light on. Are you still willing to help me out with this?
Absolutely.
All right. So prior to COVID-19, the pandemic, the church in general, and you mentioned this earlier, really everybody, but the church specifically, really didn't deal with issues of mental health very much. So what is or what should be the relationship between faith and the way people feel? In your opinion, how should they work together?
Wow.
Yeah, man. Wait, see the shirt? Controversy.
Can all the pastors turn off right now?
No, I'm getting them too. Believe me when I tell you. I specifically gather people from different areas and ask them the same questions so I can poke the bear in different.
I love it. I love it. I love the whole thing. And I think you're so brave. And I think, like you talked about vulnerability, I'm just very impressed by you and the platform that you've taken, and couldn't be more thrilled to be a part of this, Brandon. So I will dive in. I will answer.
Good luck.
I should have cheated and watched other people's answers before. So I'm going to answer it, I guess, with my answer, but the only way I know how to answer, and I think it's all of our responsibility. I just do. And I guess it goes back to me being a public school principal. It is my responsibility to help our upcoming kids, our next, generation that's going to help us carry through into the future. It is not only, it's our responsibility, to help with the mental health of our children. And so I guess I feel so strongly about that and so passionately about that, and believe, because of what has happened to me, but what I've also seen good happen to others, that it would be the responsibility of the church. What else is there? What else is there if we're not tending to the mental health of our congregation? I mean, I just think that it's time to be better for our community, and this is by far the way to go. And I think that there's ways to do it where it is called prayer. There's ways to do it that meditation is equal to religion. And I think that there's ways to do it where you can also do meditation separate from your religion. And I think that I would be an example of a person who does that. But I would say it is the responsibility of our community, and our leaders are in churches. You look up to your youth pastor, you look up to your preacher, your pastor, we had mentors who, even when I went to college, would write me letters in college. Billy was my mentor. Man and wife, they were both named Billy. How interesting is
All
that
right.
he was my mentor, and I'll never forget that. We are mentors. No matter where we are leaders. And to just say that because we're church-going people, we're mentally healthy people, is not true. So I would expect that everybody's taking responsibility for one another and supporting one another's needs. And I think that the church would be just the same as me as a school principal and working to help.
So the question I have written is really more about the church, but because we're in the education space, let me flip it just a little bit. So of course, in trying to figure out what I was going to write about for my dissertation, I kind of leaned on trauma informed, and because I'm in music education, trauma informed music education, right? So I felt this pull in that direction, obviously because of the work that I'm doing now, right? So do you think that there should be more emphasis, I guess, in terms of trauma informed educational practices? Like typically I've been asking folks about, should there be a ministry in the church, right? And I think based on your previous answer, the question would be yes. And I feel like the answer to this one is yes. But what should the schools be doing in order to better care for the mental health of these kids? Listen, the statistic that said that 50% of mental health issues are established by the age of 14 shook me. I was like, wait, those are the kids in front of me now.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's a crazy statistic. Yeah. Well, I would say that's yes, we need, and honestly, we need to do better. I think that we do like one training a year, maybe for an hour, it's a PD. And meanwhile, you and I are lucky to work in a K-6, but, we're not ignorant to the fact that there's suicide happening in our community and in kids all across the world or all across the country. And so I guess I'm the type of public school teacher who believes that it's our responsibility to teach beyond academics. I really do. And we have at our school, we pledge to teach leadership. That's one of our things that we pledge to do. And I believe in all of that. I believe we're to teach right from wrong. I believe we're there to teach about being better people, and about being better citizens. I believe in all of that. And so we're up against a lot of hard things. I'm sure that the church is up against similar tough things, especially financially. I'm sure that churches are struggling financially, and that plays a part into why those types of services aren't so accessible, right? I think that they say that there's really, you're supposed to have one counselor for every 125 kids or something like that. And we know that we've got over 800 kids and a principal and a counselor, and that's what we've got. And so the responsibility kind of goes back onto the teacher. So absolutely. I also, I know I've worked in areas that the majority of students suffered some form of trauma. I taught in an area in the suburbs here of Arizona where a lot of our students were children of illegal immigrants, and they would tell me their stories of crossing the border, when they were little, and now they would just. This was ages ago now, but just hearing these stories and thinking of then the cushy childhood I had, it just. So I think too, we work in a demographic that is a little bit different. But you think about even the kids that go to our school, they're still struggling. We have kids in foster care and so on. But if you think about all the kids in the community and you think kind of bigger and more broadly. Yes, we're doing a disservice if we're not recognizing their trauma. And then labeling happens and we label a kid as, acting out when they really just don't know how to deal with the things of their past. Yeah, I absolutely do believe that we need to do a better job. And we were lucky enough in our district to work with a particular teacher who, unfortunately, his son died from suicide, but he then created a bill in Arizona requiring the suicide awareness, mental health awareness to be taught in all the high schools in Arizona. So out of that came a very good legislative act. But that's just such a start, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
We're like on just
Drop in the
we're just,
bucket.
yeah, we're just doing like, we're doing stuff, but yes, yes, we need to do more. We definitely
Yeah.
need to do more.
Yeah, it's as I'm reading and stuff for my dissertation, it just kind of like opens my eyes, and I'm like, man, we as educators have so much on us to present, and we're so unprepared for the work in front of us. And I
Yeah.
think, you know, I just hope that, people like you, people like me who really care deeply about this can motivate other people to make those changes, because coming out of this pandemic, boy, these kids are gonna need it. Like, they're
Yeah,
just gonna need additional support. But
absolutely.
Allison,
Absolutely.
the controversial nature of this conversation means it could go on forever. My guess is the TS Strong community will probably stop listening, do other things, they'll start cooking, doing that stuff we were talking about at the beginning of the show. I don't know. So unfortunately, I have to transition to close our interview. But as we wrap this up, I want you to consider any parting words of wisdom you may have and any resources you may want to share with our listeners. So, final 3 questions. You made it to the end. I'm so proud of you.
You're a good coach. You're a
Oh,
good
thank you
coach.
very much.
You helped me through the whole thing. Yeah, I would just say that if you are struggling, if you're somebody who's struggling, we all are. And just because we're smiling, or just because, we could get ourselves to work, or just because we could get our, the right and the left shoe on, doesn't mean we're not also struggling. So know that, and let that also give you power to get up and to make the day, and to find solace in the fact that we're here for you and you can reach out. I think that that's probably the most important thing. And pain is gonna happen, hard things are gonna happen, but you do have the power, and it might be a while. You might have to suffer from grief for a while, and that is okay. That's natural and normal, but you can, when it comes to these daily habits, you can find more solace in life. I believe in that. So I'm at second to arrow, pretty much anywhere. I'm on Twitter, so at second, the number 2, and then arrow. I'm on Instagram. I would definitely recommend, if you're a skeptic like I was, the 10% Happier book by Dan Harris.
Excellent book. I'm going to link to it.
I have a mindfulness for beginners ebook. It's just $10. It's on my website, which is also just www.second2arrow.com. But there's a lot. It's becoming a lot more of a fad, if you will. It's becoming a little bit more normalized, but I would hope that people don't see it as that fad. They can see it for the power that really is in the practice. And I'm a walking example of somebody who's lived that power.
Absolutely. Listen, you're the first guest to get all 3 wrap-up questions without me asking the wrap-up question. So, thank you very much. I was like, well, word of guidance, check. Books and research, check. Anything support, check. Okay, cool. My work here is done. I think she just made it look like I don't really need to interview. It's all good. She got this.
I prepared, everybody. I prepared.
Allison, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, your energy, your wisdom. I believe our listeners are going to do the same, and I'll see you at work.
Right. And right back at you. Right back at you. Yeah, you better have your lesson plans in, buddy. Just Thank you for having me.
You did amazing. Thank you
honor.
so much.
It was an honor. Thank you.
All right. Trauma survivors, trauma supporters, to all of you, my TS Strong community, thank you so much for investing the time to watch or to listen to another episode of the Controversy Podcast. I, your host, Brandon T. Bailey, am so grateful for your time, your attention, your energy, and your effort to support this very, very, very important mission. Listen, as we endeavor to make our show better and continue to offer incredible resources to all of you, the TS Strong community, I do have an ask. I'm going to ask that you subscribe, rate, and review the show. Let us know what you think. Let us know what we could do better. Let us know what kind of resources we can continue to offer to all of you, the TS community, so that we can all together learn to live TS Strong. All right, finally, I want to personally invite you to the Controversy Project Facebook group, A Safe Place. It is a free and exclusive community where trauma survivors and trauma supporters have gathered together to share testimonies, to share resources, and to share support and love for each other, as all of us are endeavoring to learn to live TS Strong. This is just another one of the many multimedia platforms that we have chosen to use in order to fulfill this very, very important mission. And I want to invite you to be a part of it and obviously welcome you to it in advance. Listen, in closing, until next time, I want to remind each and every one of you how important it is for you to confront your pain, how important it is for you to live your purpose, and how important it is for you to invest in your project. Till next time, peace.